All right, today we are diving into a really foundational theory in psychology, one that tries to answer a huge question. How do kids figure out what gender is? We're going to be looking at the super influential work of psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg.
I mean, we've all heard kids say some wild and funny things about being a boy or a girl, right? But seriously, how do they get from those kind of mixed up ideas to having a solid grasp on it all? What is actually going on in their little brains as they grow?
And that is the exact puzzle that Lawrence Kohlberg was trying to piece together. Now, his big idea was that a kid's understanding of gender isn't just something they learn by, copying their parents or what they see on TV. He argued that kids are actively building their own understanding of gender brick by brick as their minds mature. This whole idea has a name, the cognitive developmental approach. The core concept here is that understanding gender develops right alongside a child's other intellectual skills. Think about it. Just like they have to figure out that numbers represent amounts or that an object is still there even when you hide it, they also have to figure out gender. For Kohlberg, it wasn't so much about what kids are taught, it was about what their developing brains are actually ready to get.
So Kohlberg laid this all out as a three-step process. The best way to picture it is like a staircase. Every child, he said, climbs this staircase, and each step up represents a much more sophisticated way of thinking about gender.
The journey starts with what he called gender identity. After that, kids move up to understanding gender stability. And finally, they reach the top with gender constancy. So let's break down exactly what's happening at each of these three crucial steps.
Okay, so step 1, gender identity. This usually kicks in around age 2 or 3. And on the surface, it's pretty simple. A child can say, I'm a boy or I'm a girl. They can look at a picture and say, that's a lady. But, and this is a really big but, their actual understanding of what that label means is incredibly fragile. And this right here is a perfect example of what we mean. You might hear a 3-year-old boy say something like, when I grow up, I'm going to be a mummy. See, he knows his gender identity right now. He knows he's a boy. But he has no idea that it's a permanent thing. In his mind, it's something that could change, just like he's gonna get taller.
All right, so let's climb to that next step. This is gender stability, and it usually happens around age 4 or 5. Now, that same little boy gets it. He understands that he's going to grow up to be a man, not a mummy. He's figured out that his own gender is stable over time. But there's still a pretty significant catch.
At this stage, appearances are everything. A child's understanding of gender can still be totally fooled by what they see. So if you ask them, if a man puts on a dress, is he a woman now? A kid at this stage is very likely to say, yep. They haven't quite grasped that gender stays the same no matter what clothes someone wears or what they do. The outside stuff can still completely override their internal logic.
And finally, around age 6 or 7, kids hit the top of the staircase, gender constancy. This is the big aha moment. They finally understand that gender is permanent. It stays the same over time and across different situations. A boy is still a boy, even if he's playing with a doll. A woman is still a woman, even if she cuts her hair short. And for Kohlberg, this was the absolute key. He believed that once kids get this, they suddenly become super motivated to seek out and copy people of the same gender.
So there you have it, a neat, tidy, three-step theory. It sounds pretty logical, right? But is it actually true? Let's take a look at some of the evidence and see if it holds up.
Well, one of the biggest pieces of evidence in Kohlberg's corner comes from a 1977 study by a researcher named Damon. And what he found was this really clear connection between a child's age and just how rigid they were about gender stereotypes. This lines up perfectly with what Kohlberg predicted, that hitting that gender constancy stage is what really triggers all that black and white thinking. Here's what they did. The study told kids a clever little story about a boy named George who liked to play with dolls. Now, the 4-year-olds, the ones probably still in the gender stability stage, were mostly cool with it. They were like, okay, whatever. But the 6-year-olds, the ones who had likely reached gender constancy, they said it was just plain wrong. It really suggests that once kids decide gender is fixed, they become little enforcers of the gender rules. But, in psychology, no theory is ever the final word. And Kohlberg's theory, as revolutionary as it was, has definitely run into some serious challenges over the years. It was a fantastic start, but it's not the whole picture.
So, one of the biggest issues comes from researchers Bussey and Bandura. What they found was that kids start showing gender stereotyped preferences way before they reach gender constancy. We're talking about kids as young as 4 who already have really strong ideas about boy toys and girl toys. This goes directly against Kohlberg's timeline. It suggests that other things like social learning are kicking in much, much earlier.
And maybe the biggest limitation, especially when we look at it from our perspective today, is that the whole theory is based on a strict boy/girl binary. I mean, it was developed back in the 60s when thinking was a lot more rigid. It just doesn't have a place for the wide range of gender identities we understand and recognize now, like transgender and non-binary experiences. It really simplifies something that we now know is incredibly complex. So, where does all this leave us? Do we just toss Kohlberg's theory out the window? No, not at all. It just means that his theory is one really important piece of a much, much bigger puzzle.
What most psychologists agree on today is that gender development is this incredibly complex interaction. Kohlberg did a brilliant job of showing us the nature side of things, how our brains have to mature. But other theories, like social learning theory, really highlight the nurture part, the powerful influence of parents, friends, and the world around us from day one. It's not nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture working together, constantly shaping each other.
And that kind of brings us to a final really big thought. Maybe Kohlberg's most important insight was simply that our idea of gender is something our minds literally build. And if that's true, it leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, especially for anyone who has kids or works with them. As our culture's own ideas about gender keep changing, what kind of understanding are we and the next generation constructing right now?